Welcome to class. Today we're going to be starting a unit talking about missionary life, what it's actually like on the field. And you've probably already noticed, I'm not alone in this video. We have a special guest today, a real live missionary back from the field. This is my lovely wife, Gretchen Roderick, and I just wanted to ask her a couple questions about what it was like to live on the field. And so I'll start with just that question. Gretchen, is there anything you want to tell us just in general about what it's like to live overseas as a missionary?
Well, it's the most wonderful thing in the world that I could ever have been doing, mostly because it was God called me to. And it was, although a call, super challenging, super difficult, super exciting, super exhilarating, overwhelming, undoing, all of that and more.
Okay, I want to unpack some of those comments. So we'll start with super challenging. What were some of the super challenging things that you faced overseas?
Well, part of it was cultural adjustment and just trying to understand and how to learn in a new culture, in a new place. Not understanding the language and not understanding customs and misinterpreting and being misinterpreted. And so that was very challenging. In that came the concept of relationships, and starting over and building new relationships in a place that was unfamiliar was also very challenging. I think in the long haul, the challenge was actually not being in culture shock, but thriving in culture fatigue. Just having been accustomed to what was going on and to understanding more of what was going on. Still, sometimes it just wore me down time after time after time.
When you faced those struggles, were there any things that you used that really helped you move forward and develop a positive attitude?
Well, it took a lot initially. So some of the things that helped me cope were other people, actually. Just beginning to rely on them more. Also, leaning into the Father more heavily and more completely. Admitting my sin. Culture shock and fatigue, they aren't sin, but what I do and how I respond in those times can be. Isn't always, but it can be. So just acknowledging any sin and confessing that and seeking the Father's help in being transformed and living more in accordance as one who is conformed to His image.
Okay, good. Did you have any physical challenges living overseas? How was your health?
I did have physical challenges that were a part of what the Lord had for me, I think. It wasn't just a spiritual warfare experience, but also I think just something the Father intended in my life to grow me and challenge me and change me, and again, conform me more into His image. So yeah, most of our time overseas I experienced physical issues, which also impacted my family life and ministry and our family, changed the dynamics of everything.
Okay, you mentioned family life. I happen to know you have two wonderful boys who were 2 and 4 when you got overseas. What was it like raising children overseas?
Well, now that they're young adults, looking back, I feel like we were super blessed to bring them overseas and to take them out of the environment of the United States. It caused us as a family to, I think, gel and to be more family-centric, and gave us an opportunity to be more hands-on in our parenting without the influence of our traditional culture. Certainly they were influenced by the culture that we were raising them in, and so we had to be intentional about training them up, not in our culture or the culture where we were, but in accordance with the Word of God.
Great, thank you. We're going to be looking at some of these issues in today's video. Hopefully you'll find it helpful, and thanks for tuning in. This week we're going to be focusing on the life of the missionary on the field, the missionary family, and different issues that missionaries face in their work. Today we're going to be focusing on life on the field in general. When going overseas, life is not simply just like here, but over there. Everything will change. Everything. From how you walk, to how you talk, what time you wake up, what time you go to bed, what time you eat your meals. Obviously, the way that plays out will be different in each location, but today I want to look at some broad categories for you to start considering about life of a missionary. If God is calling you to work in a completely different environment, these are just some of the things you're going to need to consider. How you will speak, how you will worship. If you are married, how you will relate to your spouse. If you are a parent, how you will relate to your children. If you're single, what does that mean in this culture? So let's just take a moment to consider each of these in a little bit more detail. We won't have enough time to look at each aspect in every part of it, but I at least want to give you a list of questions to begin processing as you consider serving God overseas or in another culture. How will you speak? What does this sentence mean to you? Karena begitu besar kasih Allah akan dunia ini, sehingga ia telah mengaruniakan anaknya yang tunggal supaya setiap orang yang percaya kepadanya tidak binasa melainkan beroleh hidup yang kekal. Probably that doesn't mean anything to you at all. If you spoke Indonesian, you would know that that is John 3:16. Everyone needs to hear the gospel in their own language, in their heart language, to fully grasp its meaning. Otherwise, it's just noise. The main reason we need to learn the language of the people among whom we are ministering is so that we can understand their concerns and share the gospel in a way they can understand. But also important is your own well-being. Life on the field can be very difficult. Building relationships with national partners is one key to being able to thrive on the field. That means being able to speak their language. Some people will try to tell you that knowing English is enough, that there are English speakers all over the world and they can influence their societies. But that is only true if your goal is to eke out an existence on the field for a short time. If you have any plans to stay, to make an impact, and to thrive while you're doing it, you must learn language. We will discuss language learning in more detail in another session. Another completely different topic is, how are you going to worship? There are so many opportunities and you'll probably use all of them at one point or another. In the beginning, you may just be involved in a house church, literally your house. Your roommate, just your spouse, your children if you have them, another missionary couple that you're working with could be gathering together as a team to form church once a week. Our team at one point, when we lived in the city of Bangalore for 4 years, our team would meet every Friday at our house. We would have worship time together. That would serve as church for us, but it would also be a time of fellowship, of sharing a meal, of discussing what it was that we felt the Lord had for us the week ahead. We would usually also do some kind of language learning activity and prayer walking in our community. Sometimes you will be a part of an international church where people who've gathered from all over the world but speak a common language, maybe Spanish, maybe English, are going to gather and worship together. As your language grows or as you have opportunity, you can get involved in a national church where you are using your target language, worshiping with people from your people group, or starting a local house church. The reason I put that down at the beginning and at the end, originally your house church, if you're going into an unreached people group, your house church would just be your family or your team. But eventually you could be involved in a network of house churches predominantly filled by local believers, maybe even those believers who have come to faith through the ministry to which God has called you. But there are multiple opportunities, and as I say, probably some mixture of all of these will be part of your experience. How are you going to relate to your spouse? You will not have a traditional marriage in a small house and a big yard and a white picket fence. People don't always realize that. It's something they forget to factor in as they get ready to go overseas. Or sometimes people thinking about missionaries on the field forget that that's not their reality. We once attended a marriage retreat for missionaries where we got great bits of advice like, have your parents watch your kids while you go out on a date. Of course, that's useless if you're living 10,000 miles away from your parents. Finally, he suggested that men do the dishes at night so their wives could go and take a bubble bath and relax. And one frustrated guy had just had enough and he shouted out, "Where are they going to take a bath? In a bucket?" Because that wasn't even a possibility in the country where we lived. What life looks like for your family if you are married will be completely different. The biggest adjustment is often with the idea that this is quote unquote the husband's job and I'm just a stay-at-home mom. For missionary couples to be effective, missionary families have to be called. Both spouses have to be all in. Half of the task on the field is reaching women, and only women will be able to do that job. How a mom with young kids does that will look different, of course, but this can never be, quote unquote, his job. And by the way, on that topic, how the father participates in raising his children will also be different. I hate hearing a dad talk about babysitting. When they're your kids, it's not babysitting. And on that topic, how will you relate to your children? There are a couple things that need to be factored in here as well. Missionary families are quite unique. Raising kids overseas does not guarantee that they will be perfect, nor does it guarantee that they will be destroyed, but I can tell you it does guarantee that they will be unusual, not bad, but unusual because they will be multicultural. We often talk about MKs, or missionary kids, and TCKs, third culture kids. We call them third culture kids because they're no longer part of their home culture, but they're never quite their host culture either. Therefore, they're third culture. This is a strength, and it is always a reality. Missionary families are not just unique, they're different. They're different for a couple of reasons. First, they live in a different and sometimes contradictory pattern. Dad is gone more, but he's also at home more. A rule of thumb that has been used for a while is that travel should be kept to about 10 nights a month. That means that 1/3 of the time Dad is gone, and some moms might say 2/3 of the time he's in the way. Most of the time there's no office, so if Dad is not on the road, he's going to be working from home. And speaking of that, where is home? Is it the culture we left or the culture where we live? Our family, for example, lived in 3 different countries, and now all of them are home, but none of them are home. The culture of each place colors our worldview so that we can seem to have a confused outlook. Should we eat with our hands or with chopsticks? With a tablespoon in our right hand and a fork in our left? Well, it depends on what we're having for supper. Missionary kids who grow up in an Islamic setting will have a view of females that has been influenced by their experiences overseas. Another example would be a famous story told about MKs when a mother wanted to prepare her kids to be normal when they came back from their time of service in Africa. So she ordered the most recent outfits and prepared them for the return trip. As they walked out of the airport in Mississippi, however, she noticed everyone was still staring at her boys who were walking behind her. When she turned around to see them, she noticed that they were walking in their latest fashion outfits with their luggage balanced securely on the top of their heads. Missionary families are also close. They experience crisis together. They live in isolation and learn to depend on each other. They live around cultural models of family closeness. Many times they are involved in homeschooling and have a lot of time together. They have a commitment to God's will and purpose as a family. They travel together more than other families as they go to different meetings. And so they just develop a closeness that can be very helpful through all of the changes that they experience. Also, it's important to remember that missionary kids are indeed educated, and there are different options for that. Homeschooling is very good for kids. It develops creativity, a better understanding of their unique worth. They tend to read better than most people, but they may lack opportunities for social interaction. In some places, homeschooling is the norm, but not everywhere. Other places, it's a boarding school. Generally, this would be high school and up, but some children do get sent as young as the 1st grade. We saw many challenges in boarding schools, but many of our adult MK friends have said they could never thank their parents enough for the opportunities that they gained by going to a boarding school. Other children will be sent to national schools, and that really depends on the setting, the country, as well as whether a rural or urban location and language issues. Some parents choose to send their children to national schools, but then augment with homeschooling to get the best of both worlds. We were fortunate that when our children were in junior high and high school, they were able to go to international schools that were close enough that they could live at home, but also get an international school education. But of course, not everyone who goes to the field is going to be married or have children. What does being single mean in this culture where you may be being sent? According to Pioneers International research, singleness is one of the main reasons missionary candidates delay appointment or never make it to the field. At the same time, single missionaries have always been the backbone of the missions endeavor. From the Apostle Paul to Lottie Moon and Henry Martin right through to the present. Some of my heroes serving on the field today in some of the hardest places are single, God-called, and God-empowered missionaries. While some single missionaries rejoice in the freedom and flexibility their singleness grants them, others struggle with a lack of companionship and a sense of loneliness or a fear of missing out. Of course, married missionaries also struggle with these same issues in different ways. The key to contentment, some would say, would be finding creative ways to develop a support structure, becoming a part of a family on the field, befriending teammates, and growing their dependence on God. On the class shell, there is a link to an annotated bibliography of resources for single missionaries. If God is calling you to consider serving as a single or to work with singles on the field, He will provide for your every need. And if He is calling you to serve as a married person, guess what? That same promise holds true. Whether married, with children, or single, you're also going to have to consider, what does it mean to be a part of a family? Extended family will not look the same on the field as it did at home. Of course, not every family in the United States has the same set of relationships as every other family either. But here are a couple more factors to consider when you try to define what is family. First, you will be part of a mission family. You'll have aunts and uncles, co-workers who become more like brothers and sisters, others who understand your journey and share your pain. Tom and Hazel picked us up at the airport when we landed in Asia for the very first time, and they immediately became surrogate parents for us, guiding us through so many different difficult days. They became grandparents to our children and still introduce themselves that way. And they are an integral part of who we are as a family. We looked forward to their visits. We loved every chance we got to be with them. And even though they've been retired for over a decade, we still look forward to the chances that we have to sit and spend time with them as part of our family. But not just the mission family, you will also begin to develop relationships with your national family. Many cultures are going to be very open to including you. You will find yourself in closer relationships and new responsibilities as you become an adopted parent, an adopted child, a beloved uncle or auntie, which often means a sponsor responsible for our children's education, and you may even find yourself arranging a marriage or naming a child, experiences that we have had on the field. Then you also will have your family of origin. They don't disappear. There will be visits to the field. There will be visits when you go back home from the field. There needs to be a lot of good communication. Stateside trips back for holidays or for longer times of rest in America can mean even more time with family than you would have had otherwise had you stayed in America. There are Skype calls. There are a lot of ways that you can maintain a relationship with your family, but make sure you don't spend so much time with your family of origin that you miss the chance to connect to your mission family and to national families on the field. You need to find your rhythm. Balance will be the key. Find things you love about your new culture and enjoy it to the hilt. Keep space for being yourself and remembering your roots. Skype mom and dad, but make new friends on the field. For every American who comes to dinner, invite a national. Find a healthy, balanced rhythm that allows you to maintain your sanity, to grow in your relationship with the Lord, and to have an impact on the field. As I say, that was a quick run, just introducing you to some topics. If a particular topic grabbed your interest and you want to explore that more, let me know, and I'd be happy to introduce you to some more resources that may be helpful for you. And in our next session, we're going to be talking about some other consequences of living in another culture. Look forward to sharing that time with you soon. Well, Gretchen is still here with me, so I want to take advantage to ask her one more question. What advice would you give to someone who is preparing to live overseas as a missionary?
Well, there are several little nuggets I would want to pass on. The first and foremost is be sure that you are remaining or abiding in Christ all the time, being intentional about making your relationship with Christ the priority of your life, and then ordering everything else as He has ordered it for you. So that would be one. Another would be sure you go with a very powerful, very committed prayer partnership with individuals, people who are going to pray for your ministry and for the work that you are doing, the people that you're ministering to, but also be praying for you specifically. And people you can be totally upfront and honest with. I recognize that that's just a handful of people, but it is super helpful to have at least two of those people who you know will be praying for you and you can be brutally honest with as you walk the journey.
Great. Thanks very much, and thank you, and God bless.